So do you want to learn how to ride a proper shoulder in? More importantly, how to avoid common mistakes that's going to increase your score in the dressage test? Because, I mean, let's face it, with a shoulder in, all you really need to do is
create the bend and energize the hind end and prevent your hindquarters from swinging out. I mean, not to mention maintain softness and the rhythm. Don't forget to control the angle.
And that's not even starting with what you need to do as a rider to put yourself and the horse in the correct position. So before we dive into shoulder ins, I just want to say that while there is a lot that you need to actually take account for when it comes to a shoulder in, it is actually a relatively easy movement once you understand what you're really aiming for. Have you ever been in a dressage lesson and the person is barking at you, like more bend or less angle, or your hind end is falling out, and they're telling you correction, and by the way, none of that is wrong, right? It's just that they're telling you corrections in the moment that apply to your exact circumstance in that exact moment. And that doesn't actually tell you what is the true correct way to do a shoulder in. Because everybody has to learn by experience. None of this is wrong. It's just a matter of, do you actually know what the proper amount of bend is? Do you actually know what the proper amount of rib bend is? Do you know exactly how far should the shoulders be off the wall? Do you know how to keep your horse's hind end in a straight line, even though the rest of them is totally bent? In order for us to be successful at dressage movements, we have to know exactly what they are and then how to measure what we're doing against what we know is correct. Because less bend, what does that even mean? Less than what I have? But in accordance to what? Because a lot of bend for a horse with a long neck versus a lot of bend with a horse with a short neck. These look like different things. So first, let's start with the three main struggles that everybody comes across when it comes to shoulder in. The first one being not able to hold the correct body position for the horse. That one's kind of a given. Obviously, if you're not doing it correct, then that would be a big struggle, right? But the second one is you're not able to maintain the rhythm, because the reality of the shoulder in is, even though you're bending your horse and they are moving at a very different angle than when you're moving straight, you're actually supposed to be maintaining the same rhythm and flow that you have because the movement is supposed to look seamless. It's supposed to look effortless. And if you have a really severe change of rhythm, then it's going to look like labored. It's going to look like your horse is really struggling through the movement. And the third one is you're using the wall to hold you up. So that all three of these things are very, very common struggles that everybody pretty much has with the shoulder in. So first, let's talk about what an exact, precise, correct shoulder in looks like, and then we'll talk about how to avoid these three mistakes. So I will find some visual aids so we can visualize what I'm talking about, but the first thing to do is talk about exactly what position is the correct position for your horse. So the first thing is that you need to have your horse running on 3 tracks. That means that the inside front leg is on its own track, the outside front leg and the inside hind leg are on the same track, and then the outside hind leg is on its own track. Now, what this really means is that your hind end continues in the exact same way as if you're straight. It means that your horse's hips stay square. So your horse's hind legs are traveling side by side and nothing actually is supposed to change in terms of direction or bend or anything like that when it comes to the hind end. Now, what this does mean is you're taking the shoulders, you're taking the front legs and the shoulders, and you're shifting it a bit to the right, meaning that your hind end stays exactly square and the front end shifts over. Now, what this does is it becomes very challenging to keep the horse moving and bent in that way. Now, of course, the neck is bent to the inside and the ribs on the inside bend around your leg, and this is what makes the movement flow in the direction you're headed. But the mechanics is the back end stays square and the front end shifts a bit over to realign itself with how the hind end is staying square. A tip that people say is that you want to be at about a 30-degree angle when it comes to moving those shoulders over, or in the idea of having a human between the horse's shoulder and the wall. So whatever works for you, however you can visualize that, whatever works for you is cool. It just means that you actually have to have some distance from the outside shoulder to the wall to show the judge, because really, what is this all about if not to get a better dressage score, to actually show the judge that you've made a difference. You've actually moved your horse in a different direction than just running up against the wall. All right, so now that we know the exact correct position of what you're aiming for with your horse, including the bend, the angle, and how your hind end is supposed to stay square, let's talk about the aids for the shoulder in. So when it comes to aids, you have both your inside leg, your outside leg, your inside hand, your outside hand, and your seat bone. Now, all of these things together need to work together to actually make this movement flow. So while the outside brings the horse's shoulder around for the angle, the inside is what pushes the horse forward into the movement of that angle. The inside leg is actually the most important piece of the shoulder in, because the inside leg not only is going to maintain the bend, it's going to maintain the bend around the rib, meaning that your inside leg is actually responsible for not only the position, but also the pace. Because what's going to happen is if you try a shoulder in for the first time, you're going to get all handsy and your legs are everywhere and you're just trying to throw spaghetti at the wall. But what inevitably happens is when you first ask a horse for shoulder in and you're trying to position them in the right position and they don't know what it is, they're going to slow down or they're going to change their pace. And so your inside leg is going to be what actually stays on, not only for the position and the correct position for the shoulder in, but also to say, all right, now keep moving. Even if you don't know what it is, keep moving. So as I said, the inside leg is actually the most important thing. But the second thing that I would put as the second most important thing is your seat bone, your inside seat bone. Because if you're able to actually have some hip flexibility in yourself and you're able to sit down a bit more on your inside seat bone, it's going to help the job of your inside leg. Now, what I'm saying is if you're not using your inside seat bone as effectively as you could, your inside leg is still going to be able to get the job done if done correctly. But your inside seat bone can really help put your horse's body in the correct position, not to mention be helpful in terms of an aid where your horse goes, oh, we're doing a shoulder in, after you and your horse are more practiced at this movement. So I am going in order of importance here. So the first one is your inside leg. The second one is your inside seat bone, because both of these things are going to help your horse move into that movement. But the third thing, and I'm going to put these in a group, is your outside leg and your outside rein. Now, what these two things do in combination is, one, your outside rein is going to tell your horse where is the line of what you want to travel on. So one thing that's going to maybe happen if you bend your horse's shoulders to the inside is they're going to keep bending and they're going to do too much angle, or they're not going to do enough angle. So the outside rein, if you put it on the line you want to travel, is going to tell your horse how much angle you want and where to stop. So your outside rein is going to dictate how much angle you want. And then your outside leg, to quote one of the ladies that I learned some dressage movements from, she's like, you could get away with murder doing shoulder in on the wall. Now your outside leg for shoulder in is to help keep the haunches in the correct position, not let them fall out. Because the easiest thing to do at this moment when you're asking the horse's shoulders to bend is to just throw the hind end out, because that's going to be what feels the most natural for them to stay as straight as possible, but not have to actually bend in the ribs and really contort their body. That's what makes shoulder in challenging. So if you're on a wall, the outside leg doesn't actually provide as much help as if you're doing a shoulder in on, say, a quarter line. One thing I will say is once you feel like you've mastered the shoulder in, the only true way to test shoulder in mastery is to do a shoulder in not on the wall, because the wall is helping you not only stay in a straight line, but also keep the hind end in the correct alignment. So the only way to truly know if you can actually do a shoulder in correctly or not is to do a shoulder in not on the wall. So maintaining our order, The inside leg is going to be what actually tells your horse what movement you're doing and how to do it. The inside seat bone is going to tell them exactly how to bend around your body for the correct bend, not only in the neck, but in the ribs as well. Your outside rein is going to tell the horse how much angle and what line you want to travel on for the shoulder in. The outside leg is going to keep the haunches in alignment. So last but not least is going to be your inside rein. Now, the reason that the inside rein to me is actually the least of all the aids we've been talking about, why it's the least impactful, is because if you're actually able to use your inside leg and your inside seat bone to get a proper bend around your leg and your horse actually moving through their body, then you could potentially have a slack inside rein at this point, and that would actually be a good thing. So the inside rein does help them keep the bend, but you don't want to fall into the trap of pulling their head into that bend. That's going to be a sign to the judge that the horse is not truly bent, that you're placing their body in the correct position. And unfortunately, it's just a dead giveaway to the judge. All right, so now we know the exact correct way to do a shoulder in. We also know all the aids that need to be applied for that correct shoulder in. Now let's talk about how to actually do a shoulder in, and if you're new at it, some tips and tricks for how to be successful at it, and then how to avoid the 3 big mistakes that I talked about at the beginning of the video. So before you do your shoulder in, if you do a 10-meter circle, and you have to have bend to successfully do a 10-meter circle, you also have to have hind end activity for a successful 10-meter circle. How does this help you? So 1, if you have the bend in the 10-meter circle and you move into the shoulder in directly out of your 10-meter circle, then you don't actually have to create the bend in the shoulder in from the straight line. You're going to already have that bend, and you're actually just going to push the horse through the bend that you already have. Now, hind end activity becomes also very important, because one thing that we talked about in the 3 big problems is the horses lose their rhythm. So in a 10-meter circle, in order to actually do a proper one, you have to maintain kind of, let's just say, the bounce of the hind end, because you have to maintain that activity to keep them stepping through in such a tight circle. So when you do your 10-meter circle, you're already going to have your bend, and you're already going to have that hind end engagement. So when you come out of your 10-meter circle and step into the shoulder in, you're at least going to have a few things just automatically checked off the laundry list of things that you need to do correctly to do a good shoulder in. So adding in a 10-meter circle, and it doesn't even have to be a 10-meter circle, it can be a 15-meter circle if you're still just learning how to do these things. The point is that by adding that 10-meter circle, it's going to inevitably help you get a better result from your shoulder in. Now, one thing I will say is when you're at the end of your shoulder in, one thing that you should always practice doing, and this is because of some of the tests that I've performed in dressage, is you want to practice at the end of a shoulder in the movement of moving back straight, like that being a specific aid. So let's wrap it up with the 3 big mistakes and how to avoid them, more importantly. All right, so the 3 biggest struggles that everyone's going to face when it comes to shoulder in is 1, not being in the correct body position for the horse. Now, of course, this entire video has not only told you what the actual correct body position of a shoulder in is, but also your individual aids and how to use them effectively so that you get a better shoulder in. But the 1 extra tip I'm going to add here is that people underestimate how much hip flexibility you really need to be a great dressage rider. So I have actually made a series called 10 horse riding improvement tests. Now, one of these tests is going to actually test your aids, and in so doing, test your hip flexibility. And if that's something that you need to work on, then it's actually going to help your dressage movements immensely, because if you're able to not only use your legs, but your hands separately from your legs, and then even more, your hips separate from your legs and your hands, it creates more assets and more tools in your toolbox to help you do some of these more advanced movements in dressage. So the second biggest struggle is rhythm. Now, one person I love watching his dressage tests is Michael Young. Now, of course, he has literally won the most gold medals in the last few Olympics of like anybody in history. So he's an easy person to point out and say, hey, you do it really well, huh? But the point isn't that he does it really well. The point is that one thing he does extraordinarily different from other competitors is when you watch him and his horse, the flow and the movements all use the exact same rhythm. So if he's in the walk, he's in his walk rhythm. If he's in the trot, he's in his trot rhythm. So whether he's doing shoulder in, whether he's doing a 10-meter circle, whether he's doing a half pass, it is always the same trot with different bends and, for the different movements. Obviously, the different movements put the horse in a different body position. But the difference between watching his test and watching somebody else's test is the trot rhythm is fluid and consistent throughout the entire duration of the test. Now, this is extraordinarily hard to do, so don't think that if you're struggling with it, that you're a bad rider or anything, or your horse is bad or anything like that. This is something that obviously he is on a level all of his own, because when you watch it, it looks easy, right?
We all know it's not, but it looks easy.
So the last one I did give you a tip in this video for, but it is using the wall to maintain your shoulder in. Now, the first thing you have to do is, once you think you've mastered the shoulder in, is move yourself off the wall. You have to try it on a quarter line, try it on the center line, and there will be tests if you're doing shoulder in. There will be dressage tests where you're not doing your shoulder in on the wall, where you actually are required to hold your shoulder in up on its own. And it's actually really hard to do. So if you fail at this the first time, don't take that personally. But the reality is, the way that you know you've mastered the shoulder in is if you're not only able to do a correct shoulder in, but you're able to do it not leaning against a wall. And one thing that's going to happen from when we talked about the aids is once you're off the wall, your outside leg and rein becomes infinitely more important. And that's why it didn't actually reach, like, the top one is your inside leg, your seat bone second, and then your outside leg and rein become the third most important thing when it comes to the order of importance. But when you're not on the wall, your outside leg and rein are going to have a very different job. So while the first two aids are going to tell the horse what you're doing, your outside aids have to tell the horse what is too much, too little, and what is the line you want to travel on. So I hope this has helped. I hope this has given you a much more comprehensive look at what a shoulder in is, how a shoulder in is supposed to go, all the different things that you're actually trying to do with your aids. Because like I said, when you're in a dressage lesson and someone's giving you a correction, it's the immediate thought becomes like, okay, like, but compared to what, right? Like, you actually have to know what you're aiming for in order to know how far away you are from it. It's the same way that you set goals. When you set a goal, you have to know where you're headed and what it's going to take to get there, and then you break it down into smaller steps to achieve the goal. So the same thing is in the dressage movements. First, you have to know what the dressage movement is and how it works, and then you backtrack into all the little individual pieces that make up that dressage movement, and then you figure out, okay, got that, gotta work on that. So, point being, I have an entire playlist also about all the individual dressage movements. But if you're looking to just improve yourself as a rider, then check out the 10 horse riding improvement tests. Whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced, I guarantee you there's a test in there that we can all fail and laugh at together. So, I'll see you on the next one.